Hello. Hi, I'm Solveig. I'm half of Geocinema. Thanks for watching our film. It was made as part of Ars Electronica last year, who asked us to articulate our method within our collective project of Geocinema. This time, I'm only here as half of Geocinema. My fellow collaborator and close friend, Bazdyrieva, had decided to stay in her country in Ukraine, where her friends and family remain with great bravery. It is with this reason that instead of continuing a session around Geocinema in her absence, we will carve out the much-needed space to sit within the moment we are in with the ongoing inhumane war the Russian state is waging on Ukraine. This war that many of us, particularly in the West, don't know where to begin with situating. To make a bridge from our Geocinema project, the one that you just watched, last year we circulated our first film called Making of Earths, which took its focus on the Chinese state-led digital Belt and Road and the longue durée of the modern trope that the future is manageable. This film followed a year-long research we made on the datafication of the Earth when based in China and Thailand. It is not far within constellations of remote sensing, ground receiving stations, satellite imagery, to boardrooms, laboratories, and the knowledge instrumentalized between science, corporate, and state actors that we start finding incremental decisions being made towards a very skewed normalization of problematic agreements cloaked in climate science, totalizing optical regimes, nation-state agendas, and business forecasts. Mobilized under what is often very banal and unquestionable, technical, progressive, or scientific operations, which include, for example, the so-called sustainable development of the Arctic while securing a new trade corridor as it melts, ways to accrue sets of data from the global south, the continuation of gas extraction at the same time calling it green, to mention just a few examples. And these agreements are not made with only China, but between countries globally. So what kind of future is being managed here? The kind that mobilize extractive colonial racist arrangements being actively justified under rhetorics of sustainability, development, more wealth, or stable gas granted for a calculated greater public, at least for those deemed as more, in Asia's words, qualified as a human. These cannot feel more painful at this moment with the Russian imperial project and its war in Ukraine. Not to mention the recent statement where Olaf Scholz of Germany stated that, quote, Europe has deliberately exempted energy supplies from Russia from sanctions, quote, since the heat, mobility, and power supply is too essential for Western Europe to halt the support of the Russian state and the war. So war has many regimes of visibility, temporalities, and forms of occupation, and therefore even more urgency to understand the specific in the context of Russian colonialism that is intertwined within global capitalism. We have a collective responsibility to confront this intricate web of complicity. Today, we are lucky to have Asia join us on a live call, where we have her words open and frame our session, whose sharpness and ability to point and name Russian colonial encroachment and the less-than-human calculations which have positioned Ukraine have been exhaustingly on the pulse since many years. And after her, Sasha and Anna, researcher and artist researcher and friends, whose respective research and activism I deeply respect and whose decolonial work could not be more urgent. So now I think I'm going to pass it over to Asia. Asia, are you online? Is Asia?
Yes. Can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear me and if you can see me, okay?
Yes. Hold on one second. Yeah, we can see and hear you very well.
Okay. So then I'll begin now.
Please continue. Yes.
Right. Okay. So when I received an invitation to participate in this conference, this was back in December, the event was described as being part of the project that addresses contemporary ecosystem of images. And among a number of topics to respond to, I was proposed to think about images, communicative militarism, and infrastructural power. Today, I find myself in the center of all of the above. The reason why I'm not in Barcelona physically now is the Russian military invasion into Ukraine that went full scale in February 2022. In Kiev, 5 a.m., 24th of February, I woke up to the sound of explosions, and I quickly learned that those were happening all over Ukraine. For many weeks before that morning, I lived under the pressure of anticipation of this, the fatigue and the mismatch between the perfectly scheduled Zoom reality of international calls and the one that I inhabited in Kiev, where those who had the privilege to leave left early on. In January, I bought an army-like sleeping bag that withholds temperatures up to minus 28 degrees Celsius, and also flashlights, batteries. All my passports and cash were placed nearby. This was the basis for what was called an anxiety bag, the one that has all the essentials for you to survive in the bomb shelter. When I woke up to the sound of explosions at 5 a.m., I was not ready for it despite all these preparations. It felt like an ultimate end of the world. The first siren howled an hour later. It was signaling the imposition of the martial law. The sound was distorting the space around me, horrifying in its totality. It paralyzed me and made me want to vomit. The next few days I spent in an old rotten basement that served as a shelter to me, my sister, children, men, women, and cats. I made a makeshift bed right on the ground floor, but I was not able to sleep for the first 40 hours. I would go out for a cigarette and listen to the World War II soundscape of explosions, sirens, and fighter aircrafts. This was the beginning of what has been the worst time of my life so far. I will not show images or other documentations of the ongoing war, although my current audiovisual reality is beyond excess. But I will narrate a recollection of scenes from the past 3 weeks. Therefore, be attentive to the tension between text and images as I speak about it, and be twice attentive to my speech that does not have imagery to hide behind. My intention is not to provoke an emotional response here, although when I read daily cynical statements made by European officials and media, or discursive attempts to find, quote, Putin's valid points, I think that maybe they need to feel some empathy as a means to make an ethical response instead of the calculated. What I want to provide instead is an entry point into how we need to think about cyber war, communicative militarism, Putinism, and weaponized fascism. On March 7th, it was the 12th day of the full-scale war, I wrote in my diary. The last thing I read before I went to sleep was a post from a friend. She wrote, "I'm in a hospital. It's crowded with people, with bodies, with pieces of humans and pieces of families. There is an inconsolable mother of a family. Her husband and both children were killed. My father had a heart attack." Another friend witnessed that particular act of killing. This was during the evacuation from Irpin. She wrote, "Suddenly they all went up into the air, the entire family. They flew up higher than the church, and then they fell down." I read more and more messages from people who I know, who are my neighbors. Their friend, a yoga instructor, killed. Their fellow volunteers who were delivering food to those who cannot flee, killed. Another friend, Irina, medic, killed. I think of them and I cannot sleep. They were all in their 20s and 30s. They all had lives. Elle writes in her diary, "My friends' parents have been in a basement with no food for approximately a week. Their house burned down yesterday. The area just next to Kiev, surrounded by Chechens. My other friends' family, half of it, was killed in Bucha last night, including 2 children in their homes. Bucha is a Kiev suburb. People are being shot on their doorsteps. It is an actual Holocaust and people are just watching. They are killing everyone, press, medics, people and children waiting for the evacuation buses. It looks like an ethnic cleansing." S writes to me, "You need to lock your heart now. We will get back to all of it later. I know it sounds horrible, but now we need to survive." She also told me the other day, It is important to clearly mark dates and reflect on how things change. Reflect, analyze, structure this flow. It's all I do now. These days, I'm reduced to the war. My whole family and I are in one place, which is equally close to Kiev, Kharkiv, and Dnipro, to all the fronts. We didn't have a shelter or a basement, so we would hide in a trench nearby. After many days of such a scenario, we were too tired. So when the siren starts, we just go outside and have a cigarette. Nights are more difficult. It is hard to feel a life threat and try to fall asleep out of exhaustion at the same time. When the morning comes, it's always a relief. And then the rest of the day we spent attached to the information sources as the unspeakable and the irreversible fills the news. Like many, all I could think about was images. Pregnant women carried out of maternity ward in Mariupol, mass graves into which bodies are being rapidly put as there is no other way to bury the dead of besieged and destroyed city. Bodies on the streets covered with blankets. An image of Yulia Zdanovska, 21, a talented mathematician who studied to volunteer in Kharkiv and was killed among many civilians when the city was shelled. Media and commentators kept using the word atrocities. I didn't know this word, so I had to look it up online. Everyone here is furious. Are they humans? How can they attack children's hospitals, kindergartens, evacuees, train stations, maternity wards? What are they doing and why are they doing that? It's a genocide. And I think that this production of images that stand for absolute evil is something else. The answer is on the surface once you face the monstrous body of Russian information space. My Instagram is now being bombarded with uninvited paid content, where they use pictures of destroyed Ukrainian cities, accompanied by the narrative that this is what Ukrainian army and the president did to the land. So Russia is shelling the most vulnerable, elderly women, children, to produce images that they later annotate with the opposing message. So they literally twist the narrative and target people all over the world to create this fake reality. As we speak, Russia runs a massive propaganda machine through which their message of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine is justified, starting with the mythical Ukrainian Nazis to biological laboratories being run by the US in the Ukraine, to straightforward lies about the civil war in Donbass. They have been producing this alternative reality for a long while. Now, by using these images of these atrocities, an absolute evil performed on women, children, elderly, the most vulnerable, the Russian state keeps their people properly engaged, and through these images, twisted narratives, and fake news, they want all of us to start doubting our reality too. A friend of mine, Ellie, who is an expert on fascism and conspiracy theory, texted me, "Fascists always say that they are for women and children." Meanwhile, I screenshot all 185 names of Russian rectors who signed the letter in support of Putin. I focus on the language of the media. The Guardian says, allegedly Russian missile, or Ukraine claims. And then I read dozens of comments where people, all kinds of passports, believe that this war is fake, or that this is only a Ukrainian version of the truth, and then a never-ending list of conspiracy theories, you name it. I read a long statement from an American official who connected the dots and came up with an openly anti-Semitic idea of Zelensky's coup and other nonsense wrapped meticulously in an academic language. Ellie explained to me that these same fascist mechanisms are being currently mobilized among various groups in the EU and the US. Indeed, if we were attentive enough to follow the anti-vax, the QAnon, and all sorts of conspiracy theories that are now being mobilized politically, we should have noticed the profound epistemological polarization that was unavoidable. And now we are in the beginning of the war that efficiently weaponizes nonsense, and I'm sitting in the front row taking notes. My main message is clear. This is more than fascism. This is more than colonialism, more than the genocide. This is cyber war. It is not about owning a territory. This is an attack on the very possibility of making sense of reality. To quote my dear friend Svetlana Matviyenko, who is also in Ukraine, living and writing through the war, Cyber war is broader than any isolated, sequential, or distributed attacks on digital or physical infrastructure. The attacks, destructive or symbolic, are only an element of cyber war's immersive theater. Cyber war epistemology is like a cancer of sense-making, growing abnormally and beyond limits, according to the logic of paranoia, the creation of which everyone plays a part, even you by connecting the dots. Now, to deal with the unfolding reality is necessary on multiple fronts, with multiple acknowledged responsibilities, in order to take an action. What triggers me most these days is the silence of colleagues from art and academia. I can read, oh, it's a complicated issue, in their silence. The convenience of not taking a clear stance. The convenience of thinking of Russians as passive victims of the regime who needed to be equally supported. A total blindness to all evidence of fascism that has been unfolding in Russia over the past 20 years, multiplied by a massive legacy of imperialism and colonialism. Thinking of Putin as the main evil is convenient for many, but who launches the rockets that destroy our cities and kill civilians? Who writes propaganda messages? Who publishes them? Who are those people that for decades were contributing to this massive machine of violence? Who twist the truth? Who turns the blind eye? Who are those who commit these slow and quick crimes? Having Russian heritage, I've lived in Russia long enough to witness layers and layers of colonial and imperial thinking that is ingrained deeply in all aspects of daily life, and even more so on the level of cultural production. Now, it is too easy to hide one's political ignorance by the abstract and internalized figure of authoritarianism, while others find strength to speak up. As Anna Engelgard said, against Putin in Russia does not make someone against Russian colonialism. There is the whole spectrum of colonial attitudes in Russian opposition, from more rare nationalist support of the invasion to more common complicated situation and denial that the war started in 2014. As Russian, she said, I can guarantee you that people who do a massive outcry on social media on being discriminated against as Russian citizens have screwed politics on Ukraine before the escalation. Now I, among many, demand a boycott of Russian cultural producers unless they are capable of reconfiguring their programs through decolonial lenses. The Russian Empire did, and is still doing, humanitarian, ecological, political violences to many, while oppressing the voices of those who spoke against. Needless to say that Russian modernity project is built on what was brutally taken from elsewhere. So now it is crucial for the Russian cultural production and the people to undo their own imperialist logic, otherwise there will be more blood. My request to you, those who run discourses and platforms, make a little decolonial effort and boycott Russian cultural institutions and give voice to decolonial scholars, writers, artists, but first and foremost, to populations and voices that were marginalized. Irina Zherebkina, a gender studies scholar who is currently writing from the nearly eliminated city of Kharkiv, says, the threat to the world of liberal democracy was hidden not where it was expected, not from the side of the communist idea, but from the side of the fascist. She refers to Judith Butler when she speaks about the so-called new fascism, defined through, first, legitimization of freedom to hate, and two, resentment that is mobilized to give people a sense of diminished national greatness, which is then used as an excuse to destroy democratic rights and democracy as such. Now, to complicate this scenario, I want to frame Putinism through the lens of communicative militarism and infrastructural power. Svetlana Matviyenko defines communicative militarism as a convergence between commercial, political, and military technologies, methods, tactics, and resources, including data, raw materials, and people. As we speak, Germany wages the war by paying for Russian gas. Were there proper sanctions in 2014 and 16, this war would have not happened. Were there no businesses? Were there no Nord Streams in exchange to tolerance to Russia's neo-fascist campaign? While sirens howl at night, I read Western news carefully. because I know that what I will see there is going to hit me hard. It is clear now that the West is not going to take an action. Our interest, they say, is that the conflict does not spread further than the Ukrainian territory. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, the third largest arsenal in the world, in 1994 to reassure its safety. Two of the countries that signed the Budapest Memorandum are currently attacking Ukraine. The rest is enjoying the show. The bravery of Ukrainian resistance, which was hailed during the first week, is apparently becoming inconvenient to politicians of various caliber. They delay and delay and delay, and Ukraine neither falls nor wins. Some of the comrades in arms who expressed their solidarity during the Maidan revolution have never reached out. And then I saw a post from one of them. She was angry that Ukraine received material support, angry that the white boy on the border has gotten so much visibility, angry to an extent that a person like me, still alive, or those whose homes and lives were eliminated, no longer deserves sympathy. It did hit me hard too, and I kept thinking about it because something was not quite matching. The race might not be the category inscribed in this scenario. For Western Europe, Eastern Europeans were never considered human enough. We are a resource. When COVID regulations restrict movements of people, some of us are still allowed to come to Germany to collect asparagus. The list of services for which we qualify is long. While the Russian war machine kills our people, a German diplomat a few years ago said, "We respect Ukraine's right for self-determination, but our economic ties with Russia is a priority." I am repeating myself here. The category of non-human is created at the moment of the material transaction. I keep receiving messages from people who talk to me as if I'm already dead. "I'm sorry that we gave you up. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I receive messages that acknowledge the full-scale fascist machine multiplied by the calculations of European comfort. The images of mass graves, trenches being filled with piles of bodies like it's 1943, will haunt us forever. We beg, NATO, close the sky now. Look at these children, these women, this elderly. They are dying of cold and dehydration, murdered, raped, already on the industrial scale. No, we are being sacrificed. Never again was a lie. You see, the reason for this unprecedented weapons refugee support from the West is not because I'm white, but precisely because I belong to the category of non-human. As millions of others, I was traded for gas almost until it was too late. Now, a second before it's too late, I'm offered money and the refugee status, but I am denied the protection that is granted to anyone who qualifies as human. Now, to conclude, I want to point out the complexity of Putinism as a phenomenon, as well as to invite you, all of you, to evaluate your part. I will end by quoting my dear friend Alexei Kuchansky, who wrote this from a bomb shelter. They said, "By Putinism, I mean the strange kind of huge non-human war technology predicated on merger of legal neo-patriarchy, racist violence, neoliberalist capitalism, political isolationism, disinformation, and the latest surveillance equipment. Gas, oil, weapons, and human flesh to die for a nonsense automated war, heteronormative fascism to reproduce human resources." Even that fascist himself is just a fleshy component of that mechanism. His pseudo-historical narratives of the great Russian Empire is a click of a weapon, it is a lot. Human rights are ignored. Putinism is the dark trajectory of posthumanism in a condition of global capitalism and carbon democracies. It seems to be the time when binary opposition is useful. See the difference. Neither Russians, Ukrainians, nor Russia, NATO. The opposing sides are Putinism, that is force that kills civilians and the environment in order to kill more, and the transnational network of those who believe in futures, which are alternatives to this creepy, destructive, alienated war technology. For sure, this is a strategic simplification. Solidarity is a way to neutralize Putinism as technology. But there is no solidarity without a clear understanding of which side you're on. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia. Thank you, Asia.